when Conrad said,
"When you had the chance to be with her a month after she and I broke up, you took it."
I thought to myself, finally. This conversation between Conrad and Jeremiah was one of my favorite scenes in the entire episode 10. Throughout this episode, we see Conrad trying to reach out to Jeremiah through text and hoping to see him at Christmas time, but Jeremiah didn't attend, nor has he texted Conrad back throughout this episode. So this scene on the date of the anniversary of Susanna's death is the first time that we see them talking since the scene after the wedding was called off where Jeremiah confronted Conrad at the summer house. And I can understand why Jeremiah doesn't really text Conrad back throughout this episode that displays kind of a year in time. And I can understand as well why he was hesitant to go into the house at Christmas. I'll cover that in a different video. Like I've said before, I am Team Conrad, but I try to remain very level-headed and understand where each of the characters is coming from. And I actually thought it was kind of a good thing that Conrad and Jeremiah had quite a bit of time where they had space from each other before talking again. They do look kind of nervous as they realize each other is there, and Conrad even apologizes for the fact that Jeremiah didn't realize that he was coming. I feel like Conrad has become quite the over-apologizer, but I also understand from his viewpoint, he feels like everybody is mad at him. He feels like he's kind of lost all of his friends. And then you kind of throw in the factor of his anxiety, and it's pretty easy to see why he's become such an over-apologizer. And I think in this moment here where each Conrad and Jeremiah is sharing something that they can't remember about their mother and kind of sharing how that makes them sad, it's sort of like a small bonding moment between them that I think the one thing that is still tying them together even after everything they've been through and everything that's kind of torn them apart is the fact that they both loved their mother very much and they both miss her. And I think when Conrad says this,
"Jerry, look, I know I can't make you forgive me." Nope. But I'm going to try, and I'm going to keep trying to break through. Because I miss you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
I think I'm sensing a lot of sincerity from Conrad. He does seem like he genuinely misses Jeremiah and he genuinely does want to talk about it. And when Jeremiah replies with this,
"You really want to do this here? Fine, let's do it. Let's talk about how you hung around all summer like a snake in the grass, pretending to help me with my wedding, when really you were trying to break it up and take Belly for yourself." Yeah, that's not how it was.
I think, again, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Jeremiah and I am Team Conrad, I can understand why, without all of the information, Jeremiah thinks of it that way. I think because of Jeremiah's insecurities, he is going to kind of always see Conrad as out to get him. I never really saw it that way because, like we've all mentioned before, Conrad did not say anything to Belly about his feelings until he found out about Lacey in Cabo. And we also know that Conrad did not come back to stay at the summer house because he, knew that he would end up spending the summer with Belly. He didn't even know that she was going to be there at that time. He came back because he lost his job, and I think he was just using it as sort of like a safe space to land. But I think it's easier for Jeremiah to be angry at Conrad than to kind of look at all of these facts that what he's claiming doesn't totally make sense, that it wasn't some plan that Conrad hatched, and, it wasn't something that he premeditated. He was all set to kind of keep his feelings to himself and let them go ahead and get married. And if we even remember, prior to him finding out about Lacey and Cabo, there were many moments at the summer house where he was really just trying to stay away from Belly. In episode, I think it was 5, I can't remember now, but the episode with the peach scene, he didn't really want to give her a ride to do all of her errands. He wanted to stay away from her. So I do think that Jeremiah, because he's hurting, kind of has the facts a little bit twisted and is viewing this whole thing as something that Conrad, like I said, premeditated when that's not the truth. And then when they say this to each other,
"I loved her, and you ruined it. You don't know what it's like to be with someone that long, what you build, what you lose when it disappears. She was my fucking world."
If you loved her so much, how could you go and sleep with someone else?
We were broken up. You want to know why? Because I know about the two of you on Christmas.
To me, it was really interesting how Jeremiah kind of pauses for a second, and for a split second there, he doesn't know what to say, because I do think he realizes that Conrad has a point. I do think he has to, at this point, recognize what a colossal mistake that was. And he's still saying that they were broken up, which, people can argue that until the end of time. I think that people will argue that until the end of time. But I've said this before and I'll say it again, no matter which way you slice it, whether you believe they were broken up or not, at the end of the day, that was betrayal on the part of Jeremiah. Even if they were broken up, if it's the first thing that he wanted to do was to go sleep with someone in Cabo, that's a huge betrayal. He is saying here how they built something together for 4 years. And I don't understand how he can kind of use that as an argument here, but can't recognize that that is what also applies in the situation with Lacey, that he was building something with Belly for 4 years, and then the second it seemed like they were broken up, he went and slept with somebody else. Whether you call it cheating or not, whether you think they were broken up or not, it was not something he should have done to Belly, and it was a betrayal of what they had together. And he even says that he did it because he found out about the two of them at Christmas, so it just seems like this very petty and kind of vengeful thing that he did to get back at the two of them. Instead of talking to Belly about it the moment he finds out, it seems like he sort of, plotted this revenge sort of breakup. And that's incredibly immature. And again, I can kind of look at all sides of it and say that he was hurting and he wasn't being rational. But at the end of the day, I think that was a very manipulative move on his part. And I know a lot of dialogue about whether or not Jeremiah is manipulative. I'm not going to sit here and like pretend to diagnose him with anything like that. I'm just saying it was kind of a manipulative move. I can have kind of empathy for all of the factors that led him throughout his childhood to be the way that he is, while also calling out when he does something that's wrong. And that applies to any of the characters, because as I've said before, nobody on the show is perfect, and nobody is like this evil villain. Everybody kind of they're just flawed characters, and that's why we like dissecting them so much. So then Conrad says this.
You can't take someone, Jer. She's not a fucking object. And the only reason that there was any wedding to break up was because you were afraid of losing her. As if a ring could make someone yours.
And I honestly appreciate so much that Conrad says you can't take someone, she's not an object, because she's not. That kind of mentality that either Conrad takes her away from Jeremiah or Jeremiah takes her away from Conrad, it just removes all of her agency and choice. And Conrad wouldn't be able to take her if she wasn't also interested in Conrad. It's not like if she didn't have any feelings back, that he could just still snatch her away. So I'm glad that Conrad kind of pointed that out to Jeremiah, that she's not an object, she gets a say in the matter. And when Conrad says the only reason that there was a wedding to break up is because you were afraid of losing her, he just kind of hits the nail on the head of what we've all been saying all season long, that the reason Jeremiah proposed to Belly was he was faced with the prospect of losing her forever, and he kind of tried this big last-ditch effort to do something that I think he felt would lock her down. And as Conrad is pointing out all of these things, you know, the fact that she's not an object, and that Jeremiah only proposed to her because he was afraid of losing her, you can kind of see on Jeremiah's face that he can't argue with any of this. He kind of looks shifty, he's looking around, he's looking down. I do think he knows deep down this is all true, and I think he is still kind of processing all of this. You know, we saw a little bit of a different side to Jeremiah in parts of this episode, and I'll get to that in other videos, but I think he's getting to the point where it's probably exhausting to deny the heart of everything that Conrad is saying. But Jeremiah still kind of has that sort of reactive nature when Conrad says, you know, a ring can't make someone yours. And again, I think that's his defensiveness coming out. We all know that Jeremiah is somebody who lashes out when he's angry, and then he seems to maybe kind of think about it later. But in this moment, he is having that sort of like defensive response, even though we could see on his face as Conrad was saying all of these things that I think he knows there's some truth to what Conrad is saying. So then Conrad says this.
Jer, I'm sorry that I couldn't stop loving her, and that hurt you. I hate that. But you've been that person too. When you had the chance to be with her a month after she and I broke up, you took it. You think that didn't fuck me up? You think that was easy for me?
Okay, so when Conrad says you had the chance to be with her a month after her and I broke up, you took that chance, and he kind of says, like, you think that was easy for me. I just loved that someone finally said it, because that's what I have been thinking this whole time, and I'm glad that somebody to say it was Conrad. I've been thinking that sort of this entire season that, you know, I know they dated a long time ago. People kind of keep pointing to that. Even Steven said that in the last episode. And I know that they dated for a shorter amount of time than Belly and Jeremiah did. But at the end of the day, they did have a relationship, and Jeremiah jumped at the chance to be with her right after the relationship ended, knowing that Conrad was still in love with her. And people will often point to the motel scene in season 2 where, you know, Jeremiah told Conrad that if you have feelings for her, speak up now. And Conrad didn't, you know, tell Belly, or he told her, but then he took it back. But I will just kind of cling to my own opinion that Jeremiah knew that Conrad still loved her, even though he said, oh, never mind, I didn't mean it. And as his brother, that never made sense to me. And I kind of want to get ahead another point that people bring up a lot. So I imagine somebody might bring this up as well, that there's sort of this argument that, oh, actually Jeremiah and Belly were together first because they kissed first. But I think we all knew that Conrad and Belly were building up to something together for a long time. They almost had that kiss that was ruined by the firework. Like, this is old news to me at this point, that it seems like Jeremiah kind of like sabotaged the budding relationship that was forming between Belly and Conrad that everybody could see, and just kind of tried to swoop in there himself. And I personally, everybody might view this differently. I don't think a kiss is a relationship. I don't think you can say that Belly and Jeremiah had a relationship first because they kissed. Again, like I said, everyone might have a different take on that, but to me, like, if you kiss somebody, if you've not discussed the idea of being in a relationship and you don't kind of have that conversation of like, what are we? That's not a relationship. That's a very, in my opinion, like kind of juvenile and odd way to look at it, that once you kiss somebody, you are now like bound to them. So I don't view the fact that Jeremiah and Belly kissed first as them having been in a relationship. So while, yes, Conrad and Belly dated a long time ago and it was in high school, at the end of the day, what Conrad is saying rings true, that Jeremiah jumped at the chance to be with Belly 1 month after they broke up, and he had to have known that was really hard on Conrad. And then Conrad says this.
And I get it, because you loved her so much that you forgot about everyone else. I did too.
And I think it's interesting that in a way he's showing some empathy for Jeremiah, where he's saying, I kind of understand what you did back then, because your reasoning is similar to me now confessing my love for Belly, that you let your love for Belly kind of eclipse everything else. Then Jeremiah says this about Christmas.
Never wanted to talk about Christmas because I knew the second I did, it was over. Can you blame me for wanting to hold on to her as long as I could?
No.
I just thought this was so interesting because it says so much about Jeremiah and the way he views Conrad and Belly and the way he views his own relationship at that time with Belly. He says that he never wanted to really talk about Christmas because he knew that the second he did, like, everything would be over. He kind of wanted to sort of keep that tucked away neatly in a box. And it kind of ties back to what a lot of us have been saying all season long, that Jeremiah has known deep down that Belly and Conrad still had feelings for her. And he also says that, he wanted to hold on to her for as long as he could. And it's just kind of confirming everything that we already knew, that he knew that his relationship with Belly only kind of worked as long as Conrad stayed away. He knew that there would always be something between them. And, at the end of the day, I do feel like that's kind of sad. I feel bad for him. Like I said, I really try to extend empathy for every character, the ones I do like, the ones I don't. I think if you extend the characters a little bit of grace, then you can kind of appreciate their character arc a little bit more, even if they don't really have like a huge character arc. But I do feel bad for him that he knows sort of deep down that Belly and Conrad sort of have this tie that can't be broken, and he wanted to hold on to her to kind of, delay that tie coming back into place. And when I say I feel bad for him, I don't mean that I think the actions of his that I don't agree with are right, or that I think he should have ever been manipulative or anything like that. I'm just saying that from sort of like a human perspective and trying to look at all of these characters and see why they've acted the way they have throughout this series, it's really interesting to look at the way that, sort of like the inner wounds that they have affected everything, and the way they've been raised and brought up, and the relationship between Conrad and Jeremiah. It's just kind of affected all of their decisions in this kind of mess that everything's become. So then Conrad responds with this.
Dear, I tried to stop loving her. I tried to keep my promise.
What promise?
Before Mom died, I promised her that I would try and take care of you, that I would protect you from getting hurt. I know. Shit job.
Yeah. I made her a promise too. That I wouldn't let anything get between us. So we both screwed up. She would be so mad.
So when they both share that they have each broken the promises that they made to Susanna, I thought it was really interesting that that's kind of the first time that Jeremiah has like a bit of a laugh, and it's them kind of acknowledging something that they not only have in common, but that they both messed up. So Jeremiah says that they both kind of screwed up and did a terrible job of keeping their promises. And I think it's kind of like this hint at sort of redemption for both of them, that if they can each acknowledge that they've done things wrong in this situation, which Conrad has, he's kind of apologized to everybody numerous times. He's, I think, been trying to reconcile with everybody. But I think Jeremiah saying, I did a bad job of keeping my promise too when I told Susanna that we wouldn't let anything come between us. For me, it's like one of the first times I see Jeremiah like sort of admitting that there's been ways that he's in the wrong too. Maybe not in the ways that we would want him to, but I feel like it's a step in the right direction. And then they say this to each other.
When we broke off the wedding, my first thought was I need to find Mom. My second thought was I wish I could talk to Connie. It was your fault. I needed my brother. And I still do. I'm here now.
And this part made me emotional because Jeremiah is kind of admitting to needing Conrad. And I think that's probably a hard thing for him to admit because he's always felt compared to Conrad. And for him to kind of sort of own up to the fact that in a moment where he was really struggling and going through a hard time in his life, he needed Conrad, but couldn't, really seek Conrad out because Conrad was kind of like a really big factor in all of this. But I think that was a powerful moment because the last time they interacted, Jeremiah basically said, I never want to see you again, go away from here. And we all know that that was because he was hurting. Like I said, I can hold both of those facts at the same time, that it was, some of the things he said and did seemed really toxic, but he was also hurting. Like those two truths can be kind of there at the same time. But this moment where he admits that he needs Conrad and they hug. And when Jeremiah asks Conrad,
Did Belly text you too? I won't hit you if she did.
No. We haven't talked since last summer. I've been writing her letters. She hasn't written me back. Maybe I should take that as a hint. But
I think he kind of sarcastically nods to the fact that he has hit Conrad several times, and that's kind of in the past been his go-to, has actually been violence and aggression with Conrad when he's angry at him. So again, I'm seeing a little peak of growth here, which is nice. Jeremiah seems surprised when Conrad says that they haven't talked since last summer and that Belly didn't reach out to him, which I'm going to be honest, it made me a little bit sad that Belly did not reach out to him on the anniversary of Susanna's death. But I think if I can guess why she didn't do that, I think she has been sort of scared to open that line of communication back up with Conrad. I think on some level that she knows that once she does, that opens the doorway for them to kind of potentially explore being in a relationship again. And she's scared, and I will kind of explore all of that in the deep dives that I do in a few of the other scenes, but I thought it was worth mentioning here. Jeremiah seems surprised to hear that Belly hasn't reached out to him or that they haven't talked. And again, I think it kind of confirms this narrative he had in his mind where Conrad, was trying to steal Belly and he would confess his love for her and they would just kind of run away together. So I think that's why he seems a little surprised that they're not in contact. Because I think that was what he envisioned, was that they would just kind of immediately jump back into something together. So then when Conrad tells Jeremiah that he has been sending Belly letters, but she hasn't written him back, Jeremiah says this.
I never could compete with what you two had. That connection was like a force field. Do what you have to do. Don't expect me to be okay with it. But don't fucking waste it either.
And when he says that he could never compete with what they had and the connection was like a force field, again, it just leads me to wonder why he sort of thought that if he got into a relationship with Belly that would go away, because that's really one of the central themes of this whole story. You know, we have infinity is Conrad and Belly's sort of symbol that kind of encapsulates the heart of their relationship. And I know Jeremiah had his sort of, I guess, reasons, and he thought that he could find a way to make a relationship with them work. But again, it just kind of comes back to the fact that it seems like he knew deep down all along that they would always have this really strong bond, and he already felt competitive with Conrad. So there's a part of me that still wonders why he took on a relationship where he knew that he would just always be in competition with Conrad, even when Conrad wasn't around. So when Jeremiah says that, do what you have to do, but don't expect me to be okay with it, but don't waste it either. It's, you know, we know that's kind of like his unofficial sort of blessing for Conrad to sort of go ahead and I guess not hold back anymore out of worry of how Jeremiah might feel or react. He is acknowledging that, you know, he's not going to love the idea of it. But I think in this conversation, in the scene between the two of them, Jeremiah has acknowledged multiple times that he has kind of always known that there's this force and this connection and this tie between Belly and Conrad that sort of can't be denied. And I think at this point, he probably does know that it's inevitable for them to find their way back to each other. And so I'm kind of like surprised that he is willing to even say that do what you have to do. I won't be okay with it. But, you know, I think, like I said, it's probably long-term would be really exhausting for Jeremiah to try to keep Belly and Conrad apart when he could be focusing that energy on himself, rebuilding his life and healing and sort of like maybe making different choices in his next relationship, whenever that may be. And I think we know that not Conrad or Belly would probably move forward fully with a relationship with each other unless they got some kind of okay from Jeremiah, because I do think that ultimately both Belly and Conrad do care about Jeremiah. I know there's this kind of sort of argument about Conrad's actions against Jeremiah, but we can acknowledge that what Conrad did hurt Jeremiah while also acknowledging that his intention wasn't to hurt Jeremiah. It's not like he doesn't love Belly and he just wanted to hurt Jeremiah, so he thought he would like try to steal her away, as Jeremiah says. I believe all the times Conrad has said that he doesn't want to hurt Jeremiah, I believe that those have been genuine and sincere. Did Jeremiah end up getting hurt? Yes, and that's what kind of makes this also like messy and complicated. But then Conrad and Jeremiah kind of part ways here, and I guess you can't really say they're leaving on great terms, but on better terms than they were before. Nobody has hit anybody, namely Jeremiah, because let's be honest, it's usually him who throws a punch. And, you know, they had a hug and they kind of talked about the fact that they miss each other, which is huge, because I think even before this whole thing with Belly, we could tell that there was sort of like a lot of animosity and competition between them. And I wouldn't say they had necessarily like the greatest brother relationship even before Belly. And then everything that happened with Belly just kind of threw a wrench in things and made things worse. So to hear them admit that they need each other, they miss each other, have a hug, that in itself was huge. And then for Jeremiah to sort of tell Conrad, hey, look, like, I'm not going to stand in your way if the two of you want to be together, is something that I think Conrad would have really needed to move forward in a more sort of genuine and authentic way. We can even see with the letters that he writes to Belly, and I'm going to do a separate video on the letters, but I do want to mention this here because it's relevant, that prior to Jeremiah and Conrad having this conversation, Conrad's letters, the subtle language of them was a little bit more platonic. And then in the letter that he writes to Belly after this conversation that he has with Jeremiah, he signs it, Love, Conrad. And that might seem like kind of such a small detail, but as we know, and we've mentioned, nothing is a reach with this show, no detail is too small. And I think that's actually something really significant.